Ghostface Killah!
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Ghostface Killah LP with Adrian Younge handling production. Really, Adrian Younge and Ghostface Killah double billed. 12 Reasons to Die. Ghostface Killah is a New York MC who's best known for his work and his place and his affiliation with the infamous hip-hop outfit, the Wu-Tang Clan. But his musical fame is not just limited to the Wu-Tang Clan. He is actually, in my opinion, one of the more consistent members of the outfit when it comes to solo material. Over the years, he's put out a lot of albums that people consider to be East Coast hip-hop classics like Iron Man, Supreme Clientele, as well as Fish Scale. The only album in his discography that I really sort of steer clear of is Ghost Dini. That LP is just way too tender for me. Too tender. While Ghostface Killah's last full-length LP, Apollo Kids, was good, 12 Reasons to Die is undeniably a bigger and more ambitious project. For one, Ghostface Killah works from front to back of this album with producer Adrian Younge, and while this guy is not a household name, it is great for Ghostface to work with one producer for the duration of an entire project, especially someone who is so seasoned musically. The dude is a soundtrack composer, multi-instrumentalist, and the guy has an unquenchable thirst for these old school B-movie soundtracks that are part psych rock, part soul. So while the album sonically is no Fish Scale, in a lot of ways 12 Reasons to Die is just as cinematic, if not more cinematic. For one, it's the first album that Ghostface Killah has put out in a while that tries to string together a strong narrative from beginning to end. This album is coming out through a record label affiliated with another Wu-Tang member, the RZA, and apparently there's a comic book that has inspired the narrative of this album, or vice versa. And while on the surface this does completely breathe gimmick, the album does sort of live up to this connection to the comic book with a lot of strong features from Wu affiliates, RZA occasionally popping in to kind of move the storyline along with some narrations, Ghostface Killah's very vivid and directional linear storytelling through his verses, and of course Adrian Younge's very soundtrack influenced production style. These guys together definitely do not let the concept of 12 Reasons to Die overshadow the listening experience. It enhances it instead. If there is one negative about this LP though, right from the get-go, for people who are familiar with Ghostface Killah, Ghost is not exactly creative or inventive when it comes to creating this brand new character for him to kind of act out in this new album. Because a lot like on Fish Scale, Ghostface Killah finds himself again being a drug don, moving keys. He's sort of the leader of an organized crime syndicate. There are all these references to Italian mafia culture. He's showering women with jewels and money. He's pulling triggers. There are a lot of parallels with Fish Scale on this album. Themes of vengeance and not being able to trust people around you, and of course drugs, violence, all these things come up once again. However, it's not like these albums end the same way though. Toward the end of Fish Scale, Ghostface kind of finds himself on the top of the world but kind of regretting his life choices and seeing that the drugs that he's been selling is sort of destroying lives, at least the lives of the people around him, and he's kind of having this moment of clarity. If anything puts 12 Reasons to Die above Fish Scale, it's that 12 Reasons is way more direct with its storyline and its concept. It's way more focused on the concept. There are no scary or detour tracks or anything like that separating away from the story that Ghostface Killah is trying to tell. Ghostface Killah is a thug, he's a street thug. He joins with a mob, a mafia, the DeLuca family. DeLucas? He moves up in the family, gets a lot of credibility, he makes money, then he starts a war with them, separates off from them, starts his own gang, falls in love, gets set up by this person, then he is killed by the family that he started bad blood with. And then shortly after he is killed, he arises from the dead to exact his revenge. Ghostface Killah tells this story track by track by track in his enigmatic, his trademark, gritty street cipher flow. Super enthusiastic, Ghostface Killah has this ability to spit so fast and yet hit the listener with so many things that are so so freaking clear. There's a reason people call his rhymes ghost stories. Because throughout the entirety of this album, you get a lot of vivid pictures of situations and characters, especially his character. Well, mostly his character. There are other moments where Wu affiliates come in and spit verses that are vital to the storyline, like on the song Center of Attraction. With CAPPADONNA, he comes in and spits this very loosely flowed verse that seems like it's purposely overacted to be as if it were from just a really bad B-movie or kind of hilarious, especially at the end of the track where he's like, "Oh my god, you sleepy's eyes, man! Ah, she's a setup chick!" And once Ghostface Killah rises from the dead, he's back to spitting those kind of hyper-violent, hyper-vivid, very graphic, almost cartoony 36 Chambers-esque bars where he is out to get who killed him. And if there's a way to sort of imagine offing somebody, it seems that Ghostface Killah does throughout all the verses on this LP. But, you know, some people take the violence in hip-hop and they get really offended by it, or they think that the MC is super duper duper serious about it, when the fact of the matter is, a lot of these situations that Ghostface Killah paints, it's almost just comical with how outlandishly violent some of them are. And this outlandish violence, which can at times be very hilarious, lasts for about the last 4 tracks of the album. If there's any downside to the last 4 tracks of this album, it's that they can get a little redundant with this hyper-violence. I like that the first half of this thing told this story very directly and with a lot of detail, and it seemed that each track was trying to tell a different chapter, whereas the last part of the album, the plot doesn't really seem so exact. It's more a bloodbath, if anything. I would have loved to have heard maybe some longer tracks or some more detailed tracks where Ghostface Killah is specifically getting revenge on these 12 or so people who were a part of this family who offed him in the first place. Not only would that have made the album for me a little bit more interesting lyrically and conceptually, but it would have made it actually kind of feel and read a lot like a Tarantino film, which it already kind of feels like due to the beats that Adrian Younge brings to the table. I think my only issue with some of the tracks overall is that not only are some of the songs toward the end of the LP a little redundant, but there are moments toward the beginning of the LP, like the song Rise of the Black Suits. Though the song does tell a pivotal part of the story, it seems a little short. Some of the songs, and I guess this album overall, can be a little short for something that is supposed to be so conceptual and telling a full-length story. Instrumentally, this album is freaking solid. If you listen to the instrumentals alone, with Ghostface Killah not on the tracks at all, it sounds as if the beats themselves are telling a story, because you have faster, more intense beats that drive tracks like Blood on the Cobblestone that very much fit the subject matter. A lot of fighting going on, a lot of black market crime going on, fighting with the police. That track specifically has this weird funk rock blend with very fast, detailed drums. Other tracks feature very grainy guitars, sometimes there's a little bit of tremolo on there, warm bass, some eerie organs as well, rich pianos with a lot of ambient noise around them. If there's any issue I have with the production overall, it's that the ambient noise around some of the instruments, specifically the drums, does take some of the beef out of the sound that the beats could have brung, but still, Adrian Younge does do a great job of taking the flaws that some of these sounds have and making an aesthetic with them, making that old school B-movie soundtrack aesthetic, but having enough production prowess and I guess sort of detail in there to make it feel like it's modern and not just shoddy, especially as you have these female group vocals coming in singing parts of the story in this really dramatic way. You have a member of the Delphonics appearing on one track, which is fantastic. His vocal presence on this song is not only beautiful, it's eerie. It totally fits Ghostface Killah's style, and the way that his voice is mixed and recorded, it has that old school soul music Motown vibe to it. Other tracks feel really glamorous with touches of strings, horns, what feel like tubular bells as well. Seriously, bravo to Adrian Younge. Whether it's some of the more instrumentally refined tracks toward the beginning of this album or the really gritty, layered boom bap on the latter part of the LP. The beats on this LP have a strong old school hip hop vibe, but Adrian's compositional prowess adds a strong musicality to a lot of these instrumentals. So I really loved listening to this album. I would definitely recommend it to a hip-hop fan, to a Wu-Tang fan. I'm pretty much feeling a strong 8 to a light 9 on this thing. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next. And yeah, that's it. Ghostface Killah, Adrian Younge, 12 Reasons to Die Forever.